But we spend way beyond our means. And that is a reflection that we as a nation have accepted a role for government that was never intended. We have endorsed the notion that we are to maintain endless, perpetual growing welfarism, and that we have endorsed as a people the notion that we have a worldwide responsibility to spread democracy and police our empire, and quite frankly, it will end soon if we don't quickly change our policy. It's going to end anyway because it's going to bring us to our knees in a bankruptcy. So the sooner we end that notion that the federal government should police the world, run our lives, and run the economy, the better for all of us. You know, we all understand the principle that the federal government assumes they own every single penny of our income and allow us to keep a certain percentage. And the way they collect taxes is obviously unconstitutional. The idea and notion that we're all guilty until proven innocent, and that we are literally compelled to be slaves to the government by producing records on our employees and all the onerous things that we have to do. But there is another tax, and there's another system that we have to address. And this is the area that a lot of people make fun of what we say in our campaign. Matter of fact, I've only been saying it since 1974 in every single campaign I ever ran. And that has to do with monetary policy and the need to get rid of the Federal Reserve System. You know, the statement is on TV all the time, and I'm sure you've heard it. He's the guy that wants to go back to the 19th century, live in the Dark Ages, and have commodity money. But do you know what? The whole idea of paper is so silly, ridiculous, and dangerous. I can't imagine how the people can accept the notion that a government that nearly everybody in the country now distrusts turns over to the government this power to work in collusion and secrecy with the central bank to create money out of thin air to pay the bills, and then they wonder why we have problems. You know, there are several reasons why commodity money is good. Historically, it makes a lot of sense. Even in our own history of the United States, the founders had bad results with inflation. They knew what happened to the continental dollar. The continental dollar went to zero, and the slogan came, "It's not worth a continental," man, because they had runaway inflation. So they were very interested in the monetary issue during the revolutionary time and writing of the Constitution, and that's why they precisely said that we could not emit bills of credit. Only gold and silver would be legal tender, and historically they knew it led to trouble when you allowed governments to debase and destroy the currency. So history is on our sides, and there's been never a paper currency ever persist for long periods of time. It always destructs. And it's always entertaining and interesting to me to see when they dig up a vessel in the bottom of the ocean that's been there for 500 years, and they find these barrels full of gold coins, and guess what? They're still worth an awful lot of money, you know. But you know, there's some very good reasons to be for sound money. There's a moral reason. It's deceitful, distrustful for governments to participate in counterfeit because they are debasing the value of money. They're stealing from us. It's a form of taxation. So it's a moral issue as much as anything. In one of the debates, they asked about what tax we would like to get rid of. And of course, I had claimed that I had already addressed the subject of the income tax, and we took care of that one rather easily. So I brought up the subject of the inflation tax. A lot of people don't quite understand that. How can you call this a tax? Well, when you spend beyond your means, you can tax so much, you can borrow so much, and then they still come up short, and then they print. That lowers the value of the money. And who suffers the most from the prices going up? Do the people in the government, No, the people in government, the politicians and the bureaucrats thrive on it because they spend the money first and the value of the dollar is still higher. As the money circulates, then of course the people who are in mainstream, middle class, poor people get the inflation tax. Their prices go up. So truthfully, I believe their inflation right now, their cost, the loss that they have to the purchasing power of their dollars, probably well over 10%. So somebody is literally stealing from them 10% of their hard-earned income every year. That's why they don't want this secret out of the bag, because this is the gimmick that they've been using and will continue to use. And it serves the interests of special groups. Let's say that you happen to be in the military-industrial complex, and the money gets spent first, and you happen to be a Halliburton or some other company. You get that money when it's still maintaining value, and they did not have to force more taxation. They just printed this money, so there's a tremendous benefit, and that's a transfer of wealth. The characteristic of inflation, the destruction of currency, is that it wipes out the middle class. All we have to think about is recent history in South America and Central America, and our next door neighbor, how destructive it has been to Mexico. Just think, if we wanted to deal with our problem of immigration, maybe if the Mexican government, and matter of fact, there's a move on in Mexico to have a sound currency and a healthy economy, that would do a lot to solve our problems here in the United States. But of course, if we don't deal with that problem of trade and immigration, and all our good jobs leave, and we have everybody coming here believing that we are prosperous, and we have a crisis, we really will have a job on our hands, because the entitlement system will not be able to be maintained. There's not enough working people, not enough young people to finance this perpetual entitlement obligation that we have. But the gold standard and the Federal Reserve, the lack of the gold standard, the Federal Reserve literally causes a business cycle. It sends out information and is totally destructive. It causes interest rates to go lower than they're supposed to be, and without even having savings, which is a signal for people to invest, or a signal to spend or save or whatnot. We have no savings, essentially, and yet interest rates are low. In a free market, if you had no savings, interest rates would be high and send out a certain signal to the business people on what they should do with investments. So the Federal Reserve sends out all this misinformation to our business people, but they can make money on the short run, and they can benefit by this transfer of wealth, so they don't really care about the business cycle and what might come 5 years or 10 years or 20 years down the road. They'll worry about that later on. But the inflation, the booms and the busts, the Great Depression, the inflation for wars, this is all none of this could happen without the Federal Reserve System, and more reason why we have to work to get rid of it. But one of the in the debate so far, we have not talked a whole lot about the significance of our economy. They did ask a question or two about medical care. And I was waving my hand, suggesting, well, maybe I'd like to talk about medical care, but I didn't even get to talk about it. So we haven't talked a whole lot about the economy and very little about taxation, unless I brought it up. But I believe we're really facing an economic crisis. In spite of the fact the government statistics tell us that everything is wonderful. There's no inflation, no significant unemployment rate, no worry about jobs. Forget about the deficits. Deficits don't matter. Don't bring up this silly notion of sound money. That is irrelevant. And they go on, and yet, if you think about it and you talk to your neighbor, or maybe look at your own financial situation, you realize that this country is not nearly as wealthy as we think we are and other people think we are. When you think about it, everyone in this room, if you had a generous banker and he was willing to loan you $1 million a month and never ask you to return it, we could all look pretty prosperous. But bankers can't do that. After about 2 or 3 or 4 months, he might call the loan or quit loaning it to you, and all of a sudden you're seeing their living changes. This is the way this country is operating. We're operating on the idea that we have permanent prosperity. We have rejected the notion of free market capitalism and sound money and savings. We save nothing, but we have prosperity by overconsumption, by borrowing money. not only individually, but by the corporations and by our government, and we're passing on these debts to the next generation. But we're borrowing, our national debt's going up approximately $500 billion every single year. We're financing a war by borrowing from places like China. We have to borrow between $2 and $3 billion every single day to finance our current account deficit. That's how much beyond our means that we're living. And it works fine until they quit loaning to us. And then all of a sudden, prices will go up, and interest rates will go up, and there'll be a lot of inflation. Some of you in this room, I'm sure, remember well what happened in 1979 and 1980. In order to protect and save the dollar, they had to bring interest rates up to 21.5%. And unemployment rate was 12%. It was the worst condition since the Depression. And we had inflation rate. They admitted to the prices were going up at a rate of 15%. Today they claim, no sweat, prices are only going up 2.5%. But in order to get to those numbers, we have to fudge the figures. We have to change the calculation of the CPI, and we have to omit housing and energy and food. So if you don't eat, and you don't drive, and you don't have any medical bills, then you don't have much inflation to worry about.